3, 4.
We just live right now, man. It's going down, excited for the season. You know, we coming off a playoff win. I mean, you know, we had a couple wins.
Hello, and welcome to Dear Diaries, a Milwaukee Bucks podcast presented by us, the staff of Brewhoop. My name is Riley Feldman, one of your usual co-hosts, back with yet another edition of our season preview series of podcast interviews. We've gone far and wide for this. We've gone to other Bucks podcasts, the staff of Brewhoop. We've gone to Lisa Byington. We want to thank Lisa for her time. Excellent interview. That was such a capper. And now, kind of in reverse, she's passing the torch backwards. We're going to be joined this week by Jim Paschke. I'm going to give Jim his introduction here. I mean, he doesn't need an introduction. If you're listening to a Bucks podcast, you know who he is. Rochester, Minnesota born, went to the U of M, then went to the Brown Institute, I believe. Yes. Voice of the Brewers for a brief bit of time. And then, of course, voice of your Milwaukee Bucks for over 3 decades. Jim Paschke, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing this evening?
I'm well, Riley. It's great to be with you.
This is such a pleasure. Obviously, I mean, you probably get a lot that you're something of a folk hero to a lot of Bucks fans for a lot of different reasons, depending on at any point that they watched your coverage of the team. So this is great, and I'm looking forward to get your insight onto the team here. I did want to ask, so you retired after the 2020-2021 season. For you watching the team, you still have obligations with the team, but how closely do you still follow the goings on of the league, the goings on of the team? Are you watching most nights? Like how, if you're to rate yourself, obviously you're not on the nightly grind anymore, but how much are you still kind of following the team in the retirement days now?
That's a very good question. And it's interesting. Obviously I watch a lot more televised games than I did before. Mm-hmm. I catch the Bucks when they play. I love watching and, staying up to date on what they're doing. In terms of the league, it's hard to not pay attention to that. I'm not as wired in, obviously, as I was when I was doing this for a living. That was a 24/7 situation. You know, you're constantly paying attention and listening to everything and watching and trying to, figure out tidbits and pearls of information that you can use. So that's at a very intense level. But, I keep track. I mean, my line these days is, I still love following the league and looking at nuances and how the game's played and all of that. Things that used to keep me up at night now keep me awake during the day. So I still love it. And as you mentioned, I still do a few things with the Bucks. Last year, I think I had close to 15 events. This year, moving forward now, probably a dozen to start with. And that's all behind the scenes, back of house kind of stuff with sponsors and interviews. I'll interview basketball side people, John Horst quite often, and some of his folks. We did one last night for a sponsor. And so it's great. I have to stay on top of it a little bit just to accomplish that. But, I do pay attention and I like to watch trends in the league, that sort of thing.
Do you find yourself when you're watching the games kind of commentating under your breath a little bit? Do old habits die hard? Do you kind of speak in the game as it's going from the comfort of home?
Another great question. When you call games, you look at games differently than you would as a fan. I mean, I haven't looked at a game as a fan in, including before I was the announcer. I covered the team. You're talking about over 40 years where I look at it differently. When I watch today, what I've kind of realized is that we sat on the court when I did the games and you could see different things down there that maybe the cameras didn't always pick up. I could catch things out of the corner of my eye. I used to joke that I got paid to tell people what they could see. And then I realized that I was seeing things that they couldn't see and I would work that into the broadcast. And I realize now everybody watching a game on television might see different things and announcers might see different things. So I noticed that a little bit. I watch the game the way I would if I were doing it. And so I'm looking at stuff that, maybe is off to the edge or something once in a while. When you do this for a living, somehow you learn to watch all 10 players. Yep. And when you're calling the game, you have to stay on the ball, and you kind of, your vision sort of spreads out. When you're watching at home now, when I'm watching at home, I can watch all 10 players. So that's different too. And that's a different game than what maybe I saw night to night when I was working. So it's kind of fascinating, really.
It is fascinating. And the fact that I think people appreciate it, but when you're involved in the team on a day-to-day basis, the fact that you're picking up the nuances, yes, what's happening on the court, but you have a little bit of the background of what's happening, not even off the court, but you understand the guys' personalities, the dynamics a little bit more at play, because you're literally right there every single night. And so, yes, you're picking up those nuances and then delivering that to the person viewing at home, but you're also kind of processing everything else going on. And that also, it could be Johnny Mack, it could be Marcus, like they're also giving in a little bit of that extra fill-in of what exactly is happening on the court. I mean, goes without saying, it's an extremely difficult job. I credit all you guys who are able to do it at such a high level, but I find it so fascinating, that tactical, a little bit of the chemistry stuff, some of the abstract, and bring it all together. It's a lot like the sport itself. It's like a stride, the sport that's happening.
Well, we all like 7-layer salad. We work on about a 50 to 60, 70-layer situation. I mean, there's so much going on. And I appreciate that more now that I'm not doing it. When you're doing it, it's second nature. And now I sit here and I go, wow. I mean, there's so many things going on. You make a great point. And I would add this. I used to go to practices. Marcus goes to practices all the time. And when you do that, then you have that layer of what you've seen, what you've heard, what you've talked about. And it's just like, I don't even know what it's like. It's like outer space in a way. There's stuff flying around all over the place, and you reach out and grab something at the right moment, hopefully, and put it into context based on what we're watching at the moment. So there's all this stuff flying around in your head, and then you have to stay on the ball and on the game, and you're just kind of, you're grabbing stuff here and there. I mean, it's a really interesting situation, and it's like I say, you learn how to do it, and it's not a big deal. But when you step back and you go, my goodness, there's a lot of moving parts to this, and we always knew that, but we had a job to do. So now it's like, man, I love the fact that I got to do that for a living. It was awesome.
Yeah. Well, tonight I'm not going to ask you for a 7-layer dip. I'm not going to ask you for a 50-layer dip. We'll shoot for like 20 to 25 as I grill you with our usual questions that we've run all the guests through. So I think we'll get started here. So you have the standard list of questions. Everybody who's been listening knows what to expect here. We're going to start where we start with everybody. Heading into the 2024-2025 season, which new Buck are you most intrigued by? This could be a free agent, could be one of the young guys. Who of the new acquisitions interests you?
I'm going to give you answers that might be a little different than everybody else, because okay. Having done this for so long, I'm not a Nostradamus, okay? I don't ever take on that role because I've been around too long to take on that role. And I understand that as soon as I say something or predict something or say who I think might do this, I'm going to be wrong. Something's going to happen to upend that. But I'll kind of try to share, how I view things and what I look like. And the player I'm going to say, and he's not a new Buck, but in a sense he is. I'm going to say Damian Lillard, because, he came in last year, and the coaching changes and all of that. That season was very difficult. So I view this as the new Damian Lillard in a traditional NBA season. He has a training camp. Doc Rivers has a training camp. So I'll be watching that, and I'll keep an eye on, how he and Giannis have figured something out after this past season that they can now implement this season. And one of those things is their two-man game, their pick-and-roll game. It's very effective, very difficult to defend. They can run different variations of that. Somebody said they ran that a lot when they played together. I'd like to see them triple the number of times they run that. That's I'm not talking like a coach now. That's kind of a half facetious, but not really approach to the fact that I think that's a very, very valuable weapon. And I'll be watching to see how they implement that and how those two have figured things out. And of course, they've added players to help them both do that. And we'll get into that too. But that's kind of my thought. I mean, I think everything's still we know what Giannis is, and you know, we need to find out what Damian Lillard is with Giannis a little more than we did last year, I think.
You're right that you're the first person who offered Dame here. And I think it's appropriate because there were all the extenuating circumstances. If you try to compare his last season to a couple of his last couple of seasons with Portland, obviously the closest antecedent would have been maybe some of the injury years. So even though he wasn't physically injured, it's that kind of trying to figure out where the fit is, maybe not so much physically, but in a mental or strategic capacity. And I think your point about the pick and roll is interesting because when Doc Rivers was brought on, I looked into his offenses the past, I want to say it was like the past decade or so. And so long as he had any semblance of a true point guard, he was always top 10 and very often top 5 in terms of number of pick and rolls run. So there was a increase in how often it was run by those two, Giannis and Dame, at the end of the season compared to the start of the season. But now that, like you say, they have the training camp, how much more does that get shot way up? And I think even as a work in progress, it was a really effective set. Obviously, the playoffs happen. Giannis gets injured. You can't see it in the playoff setting, but it feels like the right mesh of player, coach to make it happen. This is not a coach who doesn't understand. I mean, he himself was a point guard. It's not a coach that doesn't understand how to do the pick and roll game. And I'm just very curious how they implement that and how often they go to it right away from the start of the season.
You know, I think it's pretty standard that the more you run something, the easier it becomes to defend. That's pretty logical, right?
Yep.
Except if it's unstoppable.
Exactly.
And I think that I'll be looking to see how often they can run it and can it be unstoppable? And if it's unstoppable, you don't have to pull back on that. You can go to that over and over and over. And again, there will be variations that will help them too, that will make it even more unstoppable. I see it as potentially nothing's unstoppable, but I see it as very, very prolific and successful against most teams. So that's what I'll be looking for. You have me curious. What other names came up? How have other people answered that question with the new Buck and the impact?
We've had a lot of AJ Johnson. I think he's the great unknown, obviously for not a lot of experience or tape to go off of from his time in Australia. But I think the summer league experience in particular intrigued a lot of people. He clearly has speed for days, and seeing how he puts it together. I think the two other main options have been DeLon Wright, because trying to find who the backup point guard is and what their role is with this team has been not a challenge, but kind of a puzzle piece for a number of years, just because of the players who have been in front of them in the starting lineup. And then Gary Trent Jr. trying to fit the mold of the fifth starter. It's both, I don't want to say the easiest job, but it's in some sense like the most straightforward job given the other starters, but also maybe one of the most important because he's going to be the linchpin for a lot on both ends of the floor. So those three in particular have gotten a lot of buzz from people who have been on so far.
I think if AJ Johnson is significantly contributing to this team this year, we'll have an upset story and a major story. I don't think that's going to happen. He's very young. I think in 2 years, we'll be talking about that differently.
Yep.
That's my opinion on him. I think Tyler Smith might be able to contribute a little more right away, it appears to me. And I think we all have to remember, and things can change, but, on paper, Doc Rivers is an old school coach, and there's pressure on this team to win another championship. I don't think that's, a stretch by any imagination. I mean, you want to win more than one with Giannis, and the window's closing. And so if that's true, young players probably aren't going to get the playing time. If I were coaching this team, I'd be going with guys that have been there, done that over and over, and I'd be on their butts every day to do it again. And I'd worry about development, in practice. That's how I would look at it, but we'll see what they do.
The Bucks players listening to the podcast are thinking they're lucky stars. Doc hasn't called you into the staff just yet. So,
well, if I had to put $1 down, I'd say that's probably what.
Yeah. I agree. I think the young guys, it's more so interest in what do you see in the first season, and is that something it's kind of like Andre Jackson Jr. last season, where you see a little bit of flashes and you wonder what comes down the road, not necessarily I mean, he was forced to playing a couple of minutes because of injuries, but not necessarily having to ride one of these guys. But I think because he's, I don't want to say lottery ticket, but sort of the one who you have the most curiosity about long term. I think that's where they were going with Red.
It's a big swing, and we'll see where the fence is, but the fence is a year or two out, in my opinion. And I always use the comparison, and I think it's a good one, because let's go back to Michael Redd's rookie season. He sat and watched. He studied at the right arm, left arm, whichever side he was on, next to Ray Allen, and that was a very valuable year for him. And so if A.J. Johnson is sitting next to somebody like Damian Lillard or whomever, Chris Middleton or whomever for a year, don't discount the value in that. I just think that everybody wants to play. AJ's going to want to come in and show what he can do. But if he has to sit and learn, if there's tutelage going on for a whole season, that's not a bad thing. And, Michael Redd, to me, is a pretty good example of that.
Yeah. I think this is a good segue into our next question. So there are going to be minutes around for the young guys to play. And this question is not necessarily all the way to the playoffs, though you may be taken this way. So the question is, the young buck, i.e. a guy with 2 years or less pro experience who will have the greatest impact on the season. Your group of 6 to pull from: AJ Green, Andre Jackson Jr., AJ Johnson, Tyler Smith, Chris Livingston, and Marjon Beauchamp. And this can kind of be up to you. If it's guy who has the best regular season, and maybe they, because Doc goes with the vets in the playoffs, they don't have as big of an impact in the postseason. But who do you think of that group has the best chance to have something of a little bit of a role with this?
Well, again, I think it's going to be a minutes situation. They're not going to get a lot of minutes. Green has shown that he can shoot, so I think his minutes are established to some degree, but maybe one of the 3 veteran free agent players they brought in might take some of the minutes that those young players will get. So I guess Green would be the one I would say that might have the greatest impact. It's a critical year for Marjon Beauchamp. He might be a better player than he's been able to show because of lack of minutes. We'll see what happens there. You never know. Tyler Smith can do some things. What we see from that group of young players is probably going to be sporadic because there aren't a lot of minutes. There probably won't be a lot of minutes allocated to them. So it's going to be one of those, they're going to be throwing darts, and we're going to have to appreciate the dart game with those guys I would think this year for sure, because again, this is a championship year in terms of approach and focus and all of that. And, again, you have to win games, and we'll get into that a little bit later on what I think about how you do that. But that would be my take on that group.
Yeah, I think AJ Green is the most obvious of the group, and he's been the most popular pick of most of the guests because, like you said, the shooting itself is established.
We've seen
if you look at the depth chart, if there was an injury or some guy needed rest, he's the most obvious one who could fill in within a component without needing a huge role because he's somewhat of a tertiary player with the skill set. So I think it makes sense that if anybody, we go to the end of the season and say, which of these guys had the greatest impact, i.e. you could even just say counting stats, I think AJ Green is the obvious pick. And the other ones are more so if you see progression from those dart moments, a couple of spot minutes here or there, be happy with that, because it's that fine balance between wanting to win a title and also people want to get excited about, who what is this guy going to be next season, and trying to kind of predict in the future, which is a little bit of a fool's errand. But I think that's kind of the balance that people have to have going into the season.
Well, I agree. If the staff, the operation felt that those players could contribute with minutes, why did they go get the 3 free agent players that, have proven track records, right? So you have to always kind of balance what the need is now, what the focus is now, what the goal is now, and then you have to figure out how to develop for the future as best you can without giving up the goal and the focus. And it's just purely a championship drive. That's all it is.
Yep. All right. Speaking of those free agents, I want you to rank them, the 3 guys, just for a reminder for everybody at home: DeLon Wright, Taurean Prince, and Gary Trent Jr., on how well they will fill the role they'll be given. So I'm leaving this up to the guests a little bit based on what kind of role they expect. I think most of us have an idea of based on their skill set and the way the team plays, what they're going to be brought in to do. Of those three guys, who do you think will fit in the best, and who do you think, let's not say struggle, but whatever the opposite that you would like that to be?
Well, again, it's so difficult for me to play that game because I have to see rotations and I have to see minutes and I have to see, who they're on the court with, how they're used when they're out there. So very difficult. But I will say this. I think that these were analytically processed acquisitions for two purposes: defense and shooting, around primarily Giannis and Dame Lillard. So they're there for that. All three of those players are there to contribute to defense and shooting around Lillard, Giannis, and of course Middleton and Lopez, but they're complementary for what they have to get out of the top two players, right? And so they're going to get time, they're going to get minutes. It should be pretty easy to play off of Giannis Antetokounmpo and Damian Lillard and Brook Lopez and Chris Middleton. So I expect all of them, if they keep their minds in the right place, will be able to play roles that will be very significant. And that's what those jobs are, in my opinion. Those three positions, those three players have roles to fill, and we'll have to see precisely what those roles are, and that'll be up to how Doc uses them in the minutes and all of the things that I mentioned. But so ranking them, is tough to do for me, but I think they'll all be very complicit in the success. Let's take the positive route in the success that they bring to the team.
I think it's a fascinating, I wouldn't say challenge, but it's a different thing to go at it, because the team that John Horst had built prior to Dame was predicated, yes, on Giannis, but also having a very strong point of attack point guard defender, first Eric Bledsoe, then Drew Holiday. And so picking in free agents around those guys, it's not so much that defense is secondary, but you have like a Bryn Forbes who is out there. Okay, you are here for the shooting aspect of it. Then you have like a Torrey Craig who is a lot there for the time that he's with the team for the defensive aspect. And now, because Dame is a different kind of player and the scheme differs a little bit, trying to find guys who are able to merge both of those. And I think all these guys have track records of being able to do that. It's just an interesting fold kind of as the team evolves, especially with, to me, and this is obvious to everybody else, a big change stylistically in terms of what your point guard is doing or what you're expecting from your point guard, especially at the defensive end. So I think it feels this crop, and partially this is because the Drew Holiday trade happened so late in the offseason last year, better fits in terms of what the team is going to be doing and the skill set that Dame has in particular. And that's, I think, I agree with you that I'm pretty high on all these guys. I don't think any of them are going to struggle all that much. And I give credit to John Horst of, okay, we really need these free agents. Like the free agents have to be able to right fit, found the right guys, got the right guys. I tend to agree that all of them are going to have more or less really important roles. And it's just more so when you trim down the rotation, that's where it gets, with the guys who are already here, that's the real balancing act. But obviously we have the whole season to get to that point already.
Well, let's back up to Drew Holiday for a second. There are three things that pop out to me when I think about him. To me, he's the best on-ball defender, and I boil that down to he knows when to apply 1 second of defense, whether that's at the midcourt line, whether that's at the three-point line, whether that's on the wing, wherever he needs to apply that 1 second of defense. And that's how thin the margin is. He had the ability to stop the ball for a brief period of time. But in basketball, a brief period of time can be all day. For instance, he would stop the ball. And last season, early in the year, we saw Brook Lopez blocking shots into the first row because he's moving into position for the block. When he had Drew Holiday up front, who I think is the best in the league at this, he could stop that ball long enough for Brook Lopez to get into position, go up to the block and control the block and then run out. So it's that fine. And that's what Holiday did. And then, of course, great human being. He fit in perfectly. And I always say that I've never seen a player so stealthily and carefully and intelligently infuse himself into an alpha dog team the way Drew Holiday did that year. We could see it early. He was doing it with respect for Giannis. And at the end of the year, that guy was stirring the drink every single night. And he did that so well. So when that's not here, and that's a significant piece that's gone, now you're asking three players who can play defense, but it becomes a scheme game now. Now these three guys have to figure out how to apply some of what the Bucks had when they won the championship with Holiday. And, if you think 1 second, maybe that makes it easier. Maybe you say, hey, all I got to do is impede this guy at the right time, the right point. Or they're playing schemes off of Lillard and off of Giannis. And that's where we're at defensively, I think, as we watch this. That's what I'll be looking for is how they, if they can't get that 1 second application, then I'll be looking to see, what they're doing and how they're playing off each other. But they can all play defense, but not everybody plays defense like Drew Holiday. Very few, if any, do. So that's the situation as I view it.
Yeah. How do you replace preternatural skill?
Exactly. And
it's hard. It's hard.
And that's not a comment on the trade because, you got preternatural skills of a different sort coming in. So that was a calculated decision. So I'm not going there. But when, I still believe and have always believed that defense makes the difference.
Yep.
And the margins are slim and, it's just the way it is. You'll never get me to believe that you can outscore teams in the NBA on a regular basis on command. At times you can, but I'd rather rely on stopping scoring than trying to create it because, sometimes it just doesn't happen.
Yeah. And when Drew Holiday was here, the team had at 3 levels of defense, essentially preternatural skills. You have Drew on the perimeter or even Herring, the ball handler. You have Brooke in the paint, and then you have Giannis, the wrecking ball, who can play kind of all over the place. And so now, like you said, you replace one of those. Can you scheme in that first guy? How do you compensate for that? Because you still have the 2 other guys. Yeah.
Such a great point. And you just triggered something in me. My first year with the Bucks, Jack Sikma came here. Okay, so now you reverse this because now you have the guy at the basket who is the backstop, and Alvin Robertson led the league in steals. I mean, he's out there going crazy because he has Sikma in the back. And then you fast forward to 2021, and you have Drew Holiday being the stopper at the top, and then that creates situations mid and at the hoop defensively with that little bit of time to be in the right position. And so you can do it different ways. That's my point, but you need to have a system that works in one of those 2 ways typically.
Yeah. I'm getting excited about the season just talking about this, thinking about what's going to be coming down the pike. I think part of it is a credit to Drew Holiday as a player. You could tell, like you said, immediately when he stepped on the court, like, okay, this is a completely different level that we've ever seen with the Bucks.
Well, I mean, very few players, he was that year, he was the best in the league at it, right? Yep. He was first team all defense and he played the point guard position. And, this 1 second thing, that's just what I saw. And I use that as an example of how it affects everybody behind him. And the way the game's played today, when Sikma was here, Sikma was the big guy out there shooting threes. Now, the game's played differently. So having that 1 second, impactful 1 second on the ball is very critical.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk the big 3 now. Big 3 sans Giannis, the big other 3, let's call them that. I want you to rank these players in terms of their importance to the season. Damian Lillard, new Buck Damian Lillard, Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez.
Well, I guess I'd have to go with Lillard because, I'm sure and I know that he believes he can bring a lot more than he was able to bring last year. We touched on, different season in terms of coaching changes, just first year, but he also had a tough year personally. And he has said that, he figured that out or at least has a better handle on all of that. And I think that'll make a big difference. He wants to be Dame Lillard on a championship team, and he knows that he has a great chance here. So it starts there for me. Chris Middleton, is rock solid. People say, he's hurt and all of this. Yeah, he probably can't play 36 minutes as often as he has in the past, but he'll play 26. And now that becomes a situation where the coaching staff, Doc Rivers and everyone else, will figure out which 26 minutes he should be playing. And I suspect that a lot of his minutes, and we can track this all season long, if he plays 26 minutes, just check how many of those minutes are coming in the fourth quarter. Mm-hmm. And he's a big play guy. He's a tight game, big play player, and he can still do that. And to me, Brook Lopez, he's in such good shape, and that body is so, incredible, really, that's keeping him at the elite level this late in his career. So I still think that we'll get a lot of positives out of Brook Lopez. It gets tougher when you get to be that age, but he's defying age a little bit, and so I kind of count on Middleton and Lopez to do what they've done, and then I'm looking for Lillard to have figured out how he can get back to who he is in this environment.
Yep, I think the interesting thing with Dame is, yes, okay, what is he doing in terms of production on the court? But I was telling, I think a couple of interviews ago, one of my guests, I said, I'm very curious, Dame, now that he's been a year, he's not the new guy. He's part of the organization now. He's part of the team. Not that he wasn't part of the team, but as we were saying, there's this trying to merge. As you said, Drew did such a great job in the alpha dog environment. And I think Dame made his attempt at doing that as well. But now that he's here for a year, where's his mentality at? Because that was so much of the excitement, is like, everybody knows the kind of competitor that Damian Lillard is. And I don't think there were any doubts last year that he was still that competitor, but wondering now, can he put it all together, and can we finally get that merging of production and mindset, which I think a lot of people see as similar and a sort of synonym to like Giannis's in particular. I think that's why people continue to link those two guys, because they see a lot of similarities in their approach to competitive basketball, being a competitor, trying to win. So I think that's the curious thing, kind of an abstract thing on it.
Yeah, Damian Lillard has been the guy. He was the guy in Portland pretty much every single year, wasn't he? I mean,
yep.
It was Damian Lillard's team. Now he comes to Milwaukee, where it is clearly Giannis Antetokounmpo's team. And I think there's enough mutual respect between those two players that they will figure out how to make it their team. And that's the key for me is, we might see a different Damian Lillard. When you are the best player on your team, how much more leadership is required of you, or do you have to contribute? However, maybe Lillard sees a situation where the window's closing for him and the Bucks to the point where, you know what, I might have to change what I do, what I say, and how I act on a daily basis. And you never know. You can find leadership under duress and stress that maybe you didn't know you had. And it'll be interesting to watch that, because it's going to take some really productive nastiness to go through the East and into the finals and win a championship. I mean, it's going to take some real stones, and I'll be looking to see where those stones are coming from. And they have to come from somewhere.
Yep. I got to ask one question on Chris Middleton. Is he the greatest break glass in case of emergency player that you've had the pleasure of covering? In that, when, like you said, when things get tight in the fourth quarter, who typically are you going to say, okay, the ball's going to get to Chris eventually, and he will make something happen for the team one way or another?
Well, I mean, he's very good, and I would say yes, except he's playing with Giannis Antetokounmpo and Damian Lillard. Lillard is one of the all-time NBA greats at that, right?
Yeah,
and that's pretty powerful. These kinds of thoughts and realizations have to be a daily occurrence and be reminded every day, by the players. They have to say, we have three of the best closers in the game.
Yeah.
What are we doing? If we're not using that properly, what are we doing?
Yeah.
We need to use all of that properly to win a championship. And all the pieces are here. This is a totally championship capable roster.
Yep.
Through 8 players. Or 9 players, right? And then you have a lot of talent on the back end that you can, spot play. And I mean, that's how those young guys are going to probably contribute, is through injury and in situations there'll be games where the Bucks are down 20 points and the young guys will come back and they'll get their playing time and pull them within 6, and then you can put the other guys in. And there's all kinds of things that could happen with this group, but this is totally championship capable roster, in my opinion.
Yeah. Tend to agree. I think the young guys, they got to be looking out for and there's no such thing as a bad NBA game, but the Tuesday, February game against the Washington Wizards, where it's, that not going to run the vets nearly as much. There's games like that too, where you also say, okay, we still want to win. We're going to play the vets, but is there a possibility of younger guys having more opportunities as well? So it's kind of a curious merging.
I think you have a question coming up that I will apply. I'll talk about that a little differently later, but I'll say this about the young guys. Every one of those guys in that young group hopefully will have the attitude that I'm only here this year to do whatever you need me to do in practice and in games. I mean, total complimentary, what can I add? They're additives. And they have to have that approach, because the guys in front of them, if they don't get it done, there's nothing going to happen here.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't mean you're not valuable. It can't be about me. And when you're a rookie, you want to come in and show what you have and establish yourself. Well, you're on a little bit of a different team now. And, I would like all of those young guys to, believe and say to themselves every day, I'm here to contribute what I need to and what's necessary, not what it's good for me. And, that'll help them a lot too. That's true of everybody on the team. But those young guys have to, if they're not going to get a lot of minutes, they have to have the right attitude. And to me, that would be a very good attitude for them with this group.
Yep. Yeah, it's an interesting challenge for the contending teams. How do you continue to develop the young guys? It's not Giannis's rookie year where the team struggles and you can run Giannis more minutes than you would have expected heading into the season, for example. So,
right.
Okay, here we go. Now we're going to start doing a little bit more, zooming out a little bit. So I want you to say what you think the team's current greatest weakness is. It could be a specific skill set that they might be lacking, maybe one side of the ball or the other. Is there something that you're looking at and you're going, I'm still keeping an eye out on this? That's something that I want to see them address.
Well, I mean, in terms of the basketball part of it, they're going to have to show us that they can play championship level defense on a consistent basis. I think that's something that everyone will be looking for. I don't think there are a lot of weaknesses on this team. I think that they, I think the game for this roster and the goal that this team has, and there's only one, and we know what that is, there has to be this mental focus every single day. It has to be preeminent throughout the entire season. Now, there are going to be bad days. They're going to be bad days and you're going to stumble and injuries and all of that, but you have to have a one goal mentality, and it has to be, it has to permeate everything that you do, each individual player. So, that's what I would say. I wouldn't call it a weakness, but I would call it a need. And if it's not met, then it becomes a big weakness.
Yeah. Or challenge even. A lot of these guys are multi-decade plus NBA veterans. It's a long season, but how do you find that fire within through 82 games and beyond to, you could see it in the championship season or even the season that was cut short by COVID. They were on a rampage before the season ended up getting postponed. So how do you continue to find that fire, that will within every single day? I think it's not even weakness. It's just the greatest challenge. And it's a challenge that a lot of contenders have to face. It's a challenge that even the Boston Celtics are going to have to face this year now that they've reached the mountaintop. Okay, how do you refire yourself up again? So it's not unique to them, but because they have a lot of veterans, it is something that is kind of keep in mind for the team in particular.
Yeah, exactly. And, it has to be, somebody on that team is probably going to have to sacrifice themselves and be unpopular for a season and remind the team when it needs to be reminded of why they're there. And, I hope they find that. And, I hope ideally you want your top players to all give that to you. And then guess what happens? Everybody kind of falls in line. That's what happened in 21. All those young guys, they saw what was happening at the top. Your best players, your best leaders, your best attitudes have to be at the top of the roster. They have to be the guys getting the most minutes. And historically, the Bucks have always had some of those guys, 8, 9, 10, 11 on the roster. Well, that doesn't work. Your best players have to be doing that for you. And then everything kind of just falls in. The younger guys, the guys down the list, they understand that if they don't do it the same way, they're not going to get any minutes. And so, that's something I'm looking for here again, and you have to have that to win a title, I believe. Let's take the Miami Heat as a perfect example. Sometimes, they're not always going to be a championship level team. They're not. But every single night you play them, they come out and they're gonna kick you. And they play hard every single night. Now, I'm not saying you can do that for 82 games, but boy, if you need to do it for 65, you better do it for 65 if you want to win a championship. You can't take nights off mentally. Yeah. And when your goal is singular, which this team, that's the position they're in. It's a singular goal. There's no other goal. They have to, the singular goal is to, lift the trophy again.
People will see the Miami Heat's roster and they'll see some of the changes and just aging, and they'll wonder, how is this team still kicking? How are they still? And it's like you said, I think it starts from the front office, obviously the head coach, all the way on down, and the players that they pick as well. It's kind of built into the way that things operate. And so how do you replicate that? Like I said, maybe not for all 82 or up to a 98, but how do you get close to that for most of those games?
Well, Miami's been doing this for over 20 years. I call it an impenetrable culture.
Yep.
Because you don't go down there, no matter who you are. LeBron James being an example, and I have a pretty good, young guy who worked as an intern with us is down there. So, LeBron, when he was there, he had ideas, and when he thought his ideas were, the ones that should be followed, he was reminded that that's not how it works in Miami. It's impenetrable.
Yeah.
It's not about the player. It's about the culture. It's about the goal. And they have beautiful backstops built in. You do not get anything on Eric Spoelstra because Pat Riley's going to shut that down. They have a great culture there. And that's what it takes to be competitive on the level that Miami, in my opinion, has been competitive every single year, and they've won their championships too. And so it takes that productive, creative nastiness and resolve to winning championships is not easy. I mean, it's very, very difficult, and it's really difficult to win multiple times with the same group of people. So you need a little more than just great players. You need something that's tough as nails. Yeah.
Well, you and I will both be hoping they find it this season. I feel pretty good about the odds of it.
It's there. It's just it's a matter of cultivating it, shaping it, and using it at the right time. I mean, there's so many levels to that too. It's an intriguing business when you get to this level of a roster.
Yeah. All right, let's go positive then.
All right.
What do you think is the team's current greatest strength? You can just say Giannis if you want. That would be a funny answer. It would be appropriate as well. But what would you say going to this?
I would never say that a team's greatest strength is a single player. No matter who he is. It's because it's a team game, and it just isn't. In my view, that's not what this is, and so therefore, their greatest strength can be. And I hope will be a cohesive resolve. And, having, Giannis can lead the way. Giannis can, get that mean mug and all that stuff and show the way. But, I want to see other guys that, appreciate that, follow that, and then add to it. And then, take a little pressure off one guy or, two guys, Lillard and even Middleton. But, their strength is their roster. Their strength is their starting five, their core, and their rotation players. And I really think it's a great roster if the guys on the floor focus properly. When they won the championship in 2021, Riley, I thought that, I was watching that because I couldn't be there. I had COVID. But I'm watching on TV, and it was very apparent to me that, and I think this is true of most championship teams. coaches do their thing, but when you get to the finals and you get to those closeout games and you get to the point where you can win a championship, the guys on the court kind of put blinders on and they go get it done. They don't need to look over here to find out what to do. They know what to do at that point. To win chess matches at that level in the NBA, the chess pieces have to be the ones making the moves. Yeah. There's not enough time in games like that to be, what do we need to do? No, you need to know what to do, and you have to be focused in on that. And we saw the Bucks absolutely do that. And the couple of plays will always stand out. In Game 5, at the end of the game, the steal, and Lillard was going to do what everyone would do and dribble out the clock, and Giannis points at the rim, and immediately Lillard, that's a great idea. They won it right there. They took the steam out of the Suns.
Yep.
They crushed them with that play. And that was a dribble out situation, and they crushed Phoenix by throwing that alley-oop. And then in Game 6, the Bucks are up 8. Phoenix closes to 4, and Middleton immediately hits a huge shot and gets it back to +6. Over, championship, rings are coming, and that's what I'm looking for, is that killer instinct. And I'll go a little bit further on how to implement that, because you have a question I want to answer that way coming up. But we'll talk about that.
Yeah, I think when you watch teams, especially when they get to the finals and you see them operate, there's almost something supernatural going on where, like you said, even in the series that could happen if it's the conference finals right before, you can still see moments where it's okay, they're still trying to kind of figure it out. But at the highest level, when it's competitive series, and the Suns had moments like this as well, but when you see these two teams kind of take on that next step where it's like, they're truly a machine at that point. And right. I think it was, one of the things that stands out to me in the final series is Game 1, Giannis comes back, miraculous. Oh my goodness, we thought his season was over, and he gets the ball, and the first thing he tries to do is go and dunk over 3 Suns. Right. He said he had this serious, season on the line knee injury, and he came back, and like that, he went right back to what he is best known for doing. And it's like, okay, this team they know what they're going to do to be able to get this done.
There was never any doubt what that team's purpose was.
Yeah,
they showed it to us multiple times. Throughout the season, and certainly in the playoffs. And that's what I'm talking about. You have to have that. You have to understand what that is and how to use it, because it's a very powerful weapon.
Yeah.
You're not going to beat me tonight.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a powerful weapon, and you can feel it. You in the arena or us at home. You can feel it coming off the TV.
Oh, you can see it on television. Yeah, absolutely.
It's a beautiful thing. Okay.
It's the best.
Next question for you. Something you hope to see the Bucks do during the regular season is blank. Now, I've been couching this in, it's typically for a lot of the Brewhoop staff, because we're covering the games, and you kind of find what's your little niche. Sometimes it'll be, for me, it would be like Giannis Dame pick and rolls. Like I said, let's triple it. I just want to see a lot of that throughout the season. What's some niche thing that you would like to see the team do that would keep your interest as a viewer at home?
This is the question I've been alluding to, and I'm going to. It's going to be an amplification of what I've already said probably 3 times. Last season, I felt the Bucks had. I don't even know if they had a handful of games that I felt they came out with their purpose being to make a point. I want to see this team look at the schedule. You can't do it for 82, but I want to see this team 2 or 3 times every month come out and serve notice about what their purpose is. I want to see it in November. I might even want to see it in October in the preseason. I want to see them come out with a "you're not going to beat us tonight" mentality 10, 15, 20 times.
Yep.
And I don't care when you apply that. You can decide when to do that. I want to see high-level play all year, but I want to see those 20 games where there is no doubt from the tip who's going to win that game, if possible. If you're all healthy, I want to see you come out and tell people that you're a championship-level roster. Show people that you can do that. That's your intention. We didn't see that last year. Yeah. And then when you get to the playoffs, how can you expect to see it then? This switch flipping that we all somehow think we can get away with in our lives does not work. It's a process. So I want to see that process implemented. I want to see it, I want to see kicking butt 20 times at certain points, the right points, because you can tell when those points are. You can look at the schedule. You can feel it. You can come off a losing streak of 3-4 games, and you know that fifth game better be a victory, and it's against a team that you're going to face later. I want that recognition, and then I want that result, or at least that effort, okay? I want to see that kind of we are a championship level team effort and statement made multiple times during the season.
When you were covering the team, when you were broadcasting from the court, could you feel that when the tip would happen, okay, this is going to be one of those games? Would you kind of look to Marcus and say, kind of do a little facial like, oh, this is going to be one of those games? Could you kind of feel that energy, or is it more so you have to see it develop a little bit? That's
a great question. The first teams are way back at the beginning. Those teams are winning over 50 games, and the league was a little different back then. I think a lot of teams played that way. It was still a league where it was completely about competition, and those guys were proud, and you're not going to beat me. Yeah. And if you have one or two players on every night who feel that way, it's contagious. But then the league shifted, and it's an entertainment, a little more entertainment value now, and all of that, and then you have the situation where the monetary investments are so great, you have to be careful with how you take care of yourself and how you extend yourself and all of that. But listen, if you're going to be the champion, you have to break through all of those things. And that's all I'm talking about here is, I have to say that all of this is much easier said than done.
We're here on a Thursday night.
Yeah, I mean,
if they just did this,
yeah, it's much easier said than done. But my point is, if you don't say it, how can you ever do it? I mean, you have to constantly believe that. You have to psych yourself into this, and you have to say, you know what? This is what's going to happen. And if you can apply that, and then you can extend that and show that, I mean, the playoffs become a different situation. If the Bucks had beaten Indiana during the regular season and set them on their heels and set them home wondering what the heck was going on, might have been different. Mm-hmm. And you have to, baseball pitchers, when they were pitchers, 20 years ago, they were the first at bat, they were setting up the guy for his third appearance. And now they don't face him enough and all that. But you have to be thinking ahead. You have to, you can't let a team beat you 4 times or 5 times and then expect to, roll them out of the playoffs. Yep. You've got to stick it to them a few times and let them wonder what they're going to do to beat you and, force the issue a little bit. So, again, much easier said than done, but I don't know how you win without that kind of an attitude. I don't.
Yeah. It's about making the other team ask questions. I think that's such a good way to put it. Go into the series, because going into the Pacers series, I mean, I had interviews with people who cover the Pacers, and they had very not that they didn't have questions, but fewer questions than I did on the Buck side of wondering, well, postseason is a different thing, but wondering based off the sample size, well, they're going to have to address this somehow. So yes, just even simply viewing how many questions you have going into it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was a good young team, but were they that good? I knew they were that young. So, with a young team, teach them what the NBA is about a couple times. And then at least in the playoffs, you don't have the question, can they really keep going with this? Because that was there. And they did.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Next one. This is a lot of these. I'm looking at a lot of these are very similar, but in order for the Bucks,
I guess, I don't know.
In order for the Bucks to win a title this season, they must blank.
Well, they have to stay healthy. You have to be lucky, and then you have to, have everybody, do all the things we've been talking about. And again, it is so difficult. I don't think when's the last time we had a repeat champion in the league? Well, it's been a while, right?
It has been a while. Yes. I don't have the specific off the top of my head, but it has been a bit.
Yeah. That's all we need to know, that it's very difficult to, get all the ducks in a row and get everybody on the same page and then execute, almost flawlessly for a long period of time, for 6-7 months. That's hard to do. But, if you think about it, if you talk about it, if you're, if that's your goal and you keep reminding people and you get them fired up to believe that's capable and possible, that's what has to happen. So other than that, they need to run that 2-man pick and roll with Giannis and Lillard a lot. And they need Chris Middleton to win about 4 games with key shots. And they need, blocks from Lopez. And they need to have, what they need to do? They have to have smiles on their faces when they're playing because they're kicking butt. When they won it, they were smiling because they were playing well. Yeah. They had fun because they played well. And I'd love to see that again, and I'd love to see it all the way through the season as often as possible. When this team has fun and when you're having fun and winning, you're on your way. This team is talented enough to have it be that simple, really.
Yet another answer where we boil it down to, well, if you just do this, and if Chris wins us 4 games, and then they'll be.
Here's the deal. Everything you could talk about when you ask these questions is speculative, but what I'm talking about to me isn't speculative at all because you control it.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
You can control your approach. You can control your attitude. You can control, how you practice. You can control all of that. And I'm not going to, if I have this roster, I want to control as much as I possibly can. I know I can control that, or at least I can shape it, and I can keep prodding it all year. Right. So that's just where I think this team's at,
I'm just glad you didn't answer win 16 playoff games. So you didn't go for the lowest possible hanging fruit and say they have to win 16 games since the playoffs start.
Outscore the opponent as often as possible.
Have more points at the end of the game. That's the analysis we bring you on for, Jim. Right. Okay. Last of the standard questions here, and this will be the point at which you will inform us of your approach to these sorts of questions. I want you to predict the team's finish in the East and how far they go in the playoffs.
All right. I rely on the people who make money doing that sort of thing. The odds makers and all those people, they've always had, there are great analytics in sports now, but somehow Vegas and those people had that stuff for a long, long time, and they've been pretty good at it. When they pick you as the 8th best team or 7th best team in the league after you've won a championship 3 years ago or 4 years ago, whatever it is, 3 years ago, as we speak. People say, they're discounting the Bucks. They're not discounting the Bucks. That's their analytics. And to me, to say they're discounting them or now you can come out of the weeds. No, they're disrespecting you because that's what they think is going to happen. That would make me angry. Mm-hmm. So again, I'm back to my old message here, whatever it takes to get fired up and to prove them wrong is what I'm looking at. They're top 5 in the East for me. And, I'll stick with that. Their roster's probably better than that. And, so what are you going to do about it? Right.
Yep.
That's a good answer. That's where I'm at. I don't predict because, again, I'd be wrong the minute I said something because it just, there's too many variables. But they have a top 3 roster in the East. They have a top, 5, 6 roster in the league. And, let's throw the ball up and play 82 and see what happens.
It's a beautiful note to end the standard questions on. I would be remiss, though, because I have you here. We don't have any Giannis-specific questions within our oeuvre of questions we ask all our interviewers, but I wanted to ask you, how did Giannis push you as a broadcaster? And I'll kind of expand the question a little bit for those at home. The way I was thinking about this is, in your 3+ decades covering their team, you've covered great players. You've covered great individual seasons, but for a long time, the team would have short spurts of success. And then for various different reasons, it wasn't really sustained for one reason or another. Giannis comes along. Quite clearly a different caliber of player from a lot of the guys who have come before. And it's suddenly now for you as a broadcaster, it's not a 2-year thing. It's not a 3-year thing. This is a 4-year, a 5-year, a 6-year, a 7-year project. And he's, as I said, it goes Kareem and then Giannis in terms of the titans of the franchise. So for you as a broadcaster, how did he push you? how did that present a challenge, however you want to go about it, covering Giannis at the final stages of your career?
Yeah, there's two parts to that, and I'll get to the part you're specifically asking about, I think, in a moment. But I do want to say this: in my entire 35-year career, I made it a habit to keep a buffer, a distance between myself and players on a personal level, because think of all the friends I would have lost. And you don't want to have to criticize your friends. So I always kept it professional. I kept a buffer. I mean, we were professionals. I got along with everybody. I talked to everybody, no problems with anybody. I didn't go to dinner with them. I didn't go to their house. We weren't friends. We were associates and professionals. Yeah. And then this kid from Greece shows up, 18 years old, and somehow he broke through. We did one interview a year, and I don't know what happened, but I don't know. We clicked, I mean, what am I, 50 years older than he is or something, 45 at least. And I can't explain it. And it wasn't that I let my guard down. It wasn't that I, changed my approach with a gifted player, because when he got here, we didn't know he was this gifted. We thought he could be. Yeah. But it was his personality. It's who he is. It's how he approached me. It's how we talked when we did those interviews. And he had said to me at the end, he said, "You always held me accountable," which he appreciated. So I don't know. The personal side of it was different for me. And I guess looking back on it, while I never would have done that on purpose, I will live with it because of who he is. And he proved that the night they won the championship with the T-shirt and all of that. And it just a different human being than we deal with. If we meet somebody like that once in our lives, it's pretty amazing. And I did. And so, I'm going to let that one slide because of who he is and the quality of person he is. Now, how did he affect how I broadcast? He totally affected how I did a game. And he made me, I felt like I was behind all. I couldn't look down at a note. I couldn't look at the stats monitor, because he would do something so quickly and so explosively that I would miss it. And so I had to literally change how I worked with my material to keep my eye on him during a game. I mean, and that's 100% the fact. I had to be very careful, because I got burned multiple times by him, looking, trying to, whatever I had to do. And we talked about this very early on. You're on 50 different planes, and your eyes are moving all over the place. You're just, you're trying to keep it in a sphere. But with him, you had to keep it in a little tiny, you had to thread a needle every time. And I had to learn how to do that. I mean, he really caught me off guard when he came here and started those dunks and steals and blocks. And I mean, it was wild. I had to literally change how I watched the game with my eyes.
Yeah.
It's
and
it was thrilling.
Yeah. Oh, obviously. I mean, to see, at Brewhoop, I'm known as the guy who writes all the very flowery articles praising Giannis, because I think he's such a special individual. And I think it's so special that, I don't want to say it's fate, but the circumstances that brought this 18-year-old kid from Greece, he ends up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And hearing the stories, I mean, we hear a lot from fans of interactions, even when he was first here, interacting with people. The story of him trying to run to practice in January, winter, and a professor from UWM sees, "Hey, yeah, are you Giannis? Do you need a ride?" I mean, the respect and the adoration that the people of Milwaukee have for Giannis, and the fact that he has sent it back out tenfold, and that he does all that and delivers the way he does on the court. It's something, it's a storybook, really. And so you, in your career, as a professional, now you're narrating, you're providing the voice track to a storybook that's happening in front of us all. It's such a different thing for a broadcaster to have to do, I'm sure.
He's a singular player in my time. Now, I haven't called games on a nightly basis with Damian Lillard. Of course, I called games in which he played for many years. Yeah. But Giannis is absolutely singular in my entire basketball career. And when I was with the Brewers for 7 seasons, Robin Yount was there, and he was, I kind of put them on a similar plane because they're MVP caliber players in their leagues, and they both went about their business in the very similar way. They were very dedicated. They were, I always say, the first thing Giannis does when he gets to the gym is he ties his shoes properly, and he's not even sloppy with that. And Robin was the same way, very intricate, very dedicated, very thoughtful. There was an intelligence to how they went about their preparation, and their growth followed that intelligence. And they were great people, and are to this day. And so those are the two singular athletes that I've covered in this city that are just so impressive. And I'm privileged to have had that opportunity to narrate parts of their careers, and they're just very special.
Yeah, they are. And it was special having you be able to be there to help provide a lot of that as well. So we appreciate your being part of the soundtrack.
Well,
I think that's a great thing as well.
I appreciate that Giannis came near the end, because it might have been different when I didn't know what I was doing at the beginning, and I didn't know what I was doing at the end either, but I knew more. And we'd had a long enough drought and some tough basketball. So the way that unfolded at the end of my career was just so special. And, it was wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Well, that's a good note to end our standard questions on. We thank you, Jim. We have our guests. They are they're not forced to, but we encourage them to participate in a miscellaneous segments. You're going to be debuting Paschke's Passport. Now, our other idea was Paschke's Putter, putters, plural. So it's really, I think the basis of what we're going to do for this segment is either a trip you've recently taken or something, a place you've been, could be golf related, however you like to go, that you want to wax poetic about. Where have you been? Where have you enjoyed going recently? Give us a little little peek inside the Passport.
One of the blessings of my career, Riley, has been the travel. The travel in pro sports. The first 6 or 7 years of my career, we flew commercial, and that was an entirely different situation. You couldn't do that today, but we travel very well. Planes are great. Hotels are phenomenal. They're hotels that I would never have been in myself if I hadn't been in the NBA, Major League Baseball. So all of that is top level, and that's great, and that makes it easier. But the blessing was in being able to travel this country and the world to some extent with a team, and you learn so much. When you move around the country, we're one country, but we have these areas and pockets, and it's such a blessing to see our country and how it all kind of blends together, and the fabric of all of it. And I enjoyed that so much. And I'm a big believer in travel. I've been to China with the Bucks, London with the Bucks, Paris with the Bucks, and I didn't travel when I was in my 20s. I wish I had, because when you travel internationally and even around the country to the extent we do, it changes how you view the world. And I think that it's so valuable to see different cultures, and you just look at the world differently. You look at people differently. You look at how you live your life, how we live our life in this country compared to other countries. So that's a big thing with me. I try to travel now in retirement. I think I was in 7 countries last year, and I kind of haven't had as many this year. I'm taking a cruise here coming up, and just going up to Canada and New England, and I haven't ever been to Maine, so I'm going to check that one off. But it's such a blessing to be able to do that, and to have been able to do that for all these years. So that's my thing about travel. I highly recommend it whenever you can, and do it with a purpose. Travel with a purpose. Pay attention. It's not just about getting away. It's about learning things and watching and observing. And Jim Irwin, who of course was voice of the Bucks, the Packers, and Badgers, he gave me and taught me a very valuable lesson. He said, "Jim, don't go to the big fancy tourist restaurants in cities." He said, "Go to diners, go to neighborhood spots. And man, what a great piece of advice that is. Al McGuire did that too. He'd find, little dive places, and that's where you meet and observe and learn from the real people in this country. And that was a great lesson, and I still do that to this day. I don't need to be fancy. I can be fancy. I can do that. And I can navigate that world. And I've been blessed to, be in that position many, 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 many times. And, that's wonderful. But top to bottom, is where you learn the most. So don't forget, get in there with the average folks too, not average, you know what I'm saying? Just, touch them all. Yes. All. Use a baseball phrase.
Yeah. Do you have a bucket list place that you have your eyes on in the next couple of years, or have you hit a lot of your bucket list?
I hope I'm not getting too old too fast. What I'd really like to do, to be honest with you, is I suppose I could go to warm weather in the winter, and that'd be wonderful. But what I'd kind of like to do is I'd like to go to different countries every year for 3 months. I'd like to go to Portugal for 3 months 1 year, and then go to, I love Italy. I could absolutely live in Italy. I mean, it's beautiful. I could go to Italy for 3 months. I'd like to go to Ireland for 3 months. I'd like to go to Paris and France for 3 months. I'd like to go to Vietnam for 3 months. So that would kind of be my ultimate bucket list, would be to take 3 months every year, not a week, not 2 weeks, 3 months, and just immerse myself in a country. That would be spectacular. And I don't mind traveling alone. I've done that. I've been to Budapest myself, and it's not a problem. I like it a lot. And so that's kind of what I would love to do, if I can somehow stay young enough at my age to do that.
Well, you can catch him at General Mitchell International. You'll see him at O'Hare. You'll see him at JFK, Charles de Gaulle. You'll see him around the world. Jim Paschke, thank you so much for your time tonight. I appreciate it. We're going to go ahead. We'll wrap it up there. This has been Dear Diaries. We'll continue to have our season preview series. Just a couple of weeks left until the season. Catch all our coverage at Brewhoop as usual. Pre-game, post-game, between games, Monday morning, media roundup column that I do. And we'll talk to you again very soon.